All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Archaeology with Flint Dibble. And I am joined today by a dear old friend of mine, Professor Umberto Albarella of the University of Sheffield. And he is a zooarchaeologist. He was one of my mentors and professors when I was learning zooarchaeology. And so it's really a pleasure to actually have him here, even if what we're talking about is less pleasurable. I hope we can have him back on to actually talk about his research and his teaching at some point in the future. As usual, if somebody could just put in the chat that you can hear us just fine. Do you want to say something quickly, Umberto?
No, I just wanted to say that thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be here. And as you said, we're all friends. It's always nice to see you. And yeah, I'm very nostalgic of those perhaps slightly happier times when you were in Sheffield. Yeah, no, it's great. And thanks everybody for joining.
Yeah, for sure. So here's some of those happier times right here. So on the left is actually a photo of the very first assemblage of bones I ever sorted out of class hours in Sheffield. And that's on the left. And on the right is the group of zooarchaeologists from Sheffield. I'm right here, and then Umberto's down here, and the whole group of great people were in Ankara at a conference, in 2018, I guess it was. So forever ago, but at the same time, not so long ago.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're here discussing less happy news, which is the fact that there is a major crisis in many ways for UK universities. I think the largest job losses were announced here at Cardiff University. But this is happening at up to a quarter of leading UK universities. And in many ways, it's more if you think about it, given that this is not just starting this month. This has been ongoing for years, as we'll talk about with Umberto. And so it's really hitting every single UK university. And it's also hitting universities beyond the UK, but for maybe slightly different reasons and related reasons at times. But the reason I wanted to have Umberto on to comment on this is because it was in 2021. It was announced that the Sheffield Archaeology Department was going to be cut. And they had a meeting, and then it was released on social media, and I and others tweeted about it. And there was a huge campaign for years to try to save the archaeology department of Sheffield, because it is a world class, or was, I guess, a world class archaeology department with a number of prominent scholars. It trained a number of students that went on to become successful archaeologists. It did field work all over the world. And so the cutting of such a world class department was just sort of like, how can this happen? And so Umberto was really, in many ways, the leading voice to try to save Sheffield archaeology. And the bad news is the archaeology department was dissolved in the fall. So this is the first year without an archaeology department at Sheffield, though Umberto and other scholars are still at Sheffield in different departments. So you want to talk to us a bit about what happened? What did I get right? What did I get wrong? And yeah.
No, you got everything right in terms of the story. Of course, there is a lot that could be said. As you said, the archaeology department in Sheffield had been really a very prominent department for decades, and still it was, despite the difficulties we were facing when the announcement of the closure came. And yes, we decided we had to respond. And I think we responded because we felt that what was done was clearly unjust. It was against the interest of our university, against the interest of archaeology, against the interest of the city, against the interest of the country, and against the interest of culture all over the world. So I think if there had been a situation in which really would have made sense to close the department, maybe merging elsewhere, I mean, we would have been very much prepared to accept that. But the question is that this was very much a top-down decision made in a very aggressive way. And I have to emphasize, without any previous conversation. So I think what is people should really be shocked about is that the department was closed without us ever having the opportunity to discuss the issue. Never, it's just unbelievable. So I think the Save Sheffield Archaeology campaign, in some respect, was a very exciting response to this. And it was exciting. Well, obviously, we were angry, sad, but also determined, or at least some of us were. And with these actions, with these activities, and that's something people should bear in mind for the future, especially with the sort of things that are happening now in Cardiff and elsewhere. It just requires 4 or 5 determined individuals to change things. So basically, we put together this campaign. The Sheffield department was so well known that basically the response worldwide was just amazing. I mean, just to give you an example, we put together this petition. 48,000 people signed the petition. It's a petition not on a big worldwide social issue. It's about a university department in one country. So that's quite amazing. Our vice chancellor received more than 2,000 letters of complaint from individuals, politicians, learned society, political organization, you name it, from everywhere, other universities, other departments, and so on and so forth. So the response was very strong. So I think it's something that we really should be proud of. And I have to say that also psychologically was a very difficult time. And especially, and that is something that I mostly regret, and I will never forgive my executive for doing so. It was terrible for our students. Many students went into depression. They were absolutely dejected. They could see there was no future in the field that they had chosen. But I think most important, they were absolutely disgusted by the way they had been treated. So, however, there was a lot of negativity, but to channel this negativity towards something positive, just say, we are going to respond to this, I think it was excellent. And then if you want, we can discuss about what the results of our campaign were. And I'll mention it very briefly. I don't want to talk for too much. You may want to.
Yeah, let's wait for the results in a
Yeah,
second.
okay,
Let's
yes,
think
let's
about some of the lead up. So there's a lot of similarities to what I think we experienced. I described to when I described what happened to Cardiff to people here on the channel, they were shocked because it was like the way we found out was absurd. We got an email, I guess, about a week and a half ago, in a sense, basically saying we're inviting you to a meeting of the school where the university executive board will present the results of the academic futures panel or whatever it was. I forget the wording. And so then it's like, yeah, we'll hear presentations and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, okay, this sounds interesting. We'll hear what the future is for the university. And then the email ends by saying, we understand that this news will make several of you anxious. Here are resources that you can go to for your anxiety. And it's like, what is this going to be about? And then nothing for a week until we have the meeting. And it's just like, and then at the meeting, it's told that, most of the people in the room are going to be fired in a sense. And it's just like, or at least that's the proposal, is that most of the people in the room are going to be fired. And so it's just like, it's just so callous the way they do that. And, we had a meeting at the department level and then school level this week about thinking about this and responses. And, one of the big questions that somebody asked the head of the school is, well, are they going to even read our proposals and our feedback and stuff like that? Like, what is this actually a conversation? And the answer was, I don't know. And so, that's something that I thought your perspective is interesting, because you just went through this restructuring. It sounds like the administration didn't even bother listening to any of your thoughts or ideas or feedback or anything.
No, absolutely not. There was, and to be honest with you, absolutely, the similarities are remarkable, and they don't surprise me. And they don't surprise me because what I think it's very important that people realize that what we're witnessing here is a much bigger crisis than a single department or a single university, and in fact, even than a single country. I mean, there is a broad attack on culture and education, but I think the reason why the attitude of Cardiff and Sheffield have similarities is because these managers are just following the same pattern. I mean, they have heard that there is an expectation from the powers that be that universities move in a certain direction. There is an expectation that they should behave in a different way. And because largely there are people who got into that position just by being yes, women and men, you know, they don't even have to obey orders. They have a perception that that's the way they are expected to behave. So whether it's Sheffield, Cardiff, or elsewhere, they'll do the same, being ruthless, not caring about people's feeling, not caring about people's lives. And when I say people, I mean both staff and students, and just act accordingly. And you know, if you think that the universities should be places of conversation, of exchange, or culture, you know, or understanding, it's just so absurd that they've become just the opposite of that. It's basically obey orders, just to do what you are told. Otherwise, we're going to punish you. And
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it strikes me as if in a lot of this comes out of the corporate world where CEOs and executives seem to be rewarded for being heartless and cruel to their staff in order to increase profit share, let's say, for corporations. And so I think that, especially because executives oftentimes move between one university and another. I think I brought this up in about Cardiff before. One second, let me pull up the image. You know, this building here, the Spark building, was built recently, and some of the media behind these cuts at Cardiff are pointing out, well, Cardiff has like, I forget what it was, 500 million pounds in reserve cash. And the reason that the administration and the management cannot touch those funds is because they are earmarked to pay down the debt on this building that was built not very long ago by a different administrator who moved on to a new position while the debt stayed behind. And so I feel like some of this revolving door way of managing creates sort of short-sighted goals for these executives so that they can just move on to a different position. And they want to build a new building, or they want to cut a department in order to make the university look more profitable or more prestigious, and then they move on to some other position. Did you notice things like that at Sheffield? Was it precipitated by a building boom or anything like that, or managers that were acting in short-sighted ways?
No, absolutely. I mean, it's that's the question is, and I think the key there is that they try to portray these managers. They try to portray the action as just one way. Oh, we are very sorry. We have to cut these courses. We have to cut these departments, but we are doing so in the interest of the university. That could not be further from the truth. I mean, they are doing it in their own personal interest, and in fact, very often against the interest of the university. It's as you said. I think the question is, because there is an expectation that behave in a certain way, and because there is a demand also that they should behave in a certain way, they do get rewarded. So they do a terrible job in one university. They destroy the finances of the university, they destroy the culture of the university by generating an absolutely toxic environment. And then they get rewarded and they get a better job elsewhere. We have seen it, but it's exactly the same thing we see with politicians.
Yeah,
Just
I
the
think
same
that's true.
phenomenon.
I
Yes.
think I think this phenomenon of having these short term
Yes.
positions, what it does is it divorces you from the larger community, and you're just interested in moving on.
Yes.
And I mean, we sometimes see it with academics.
Yeah.
And so I think that's against the idea of building a community, in a sense, of students and professors and people who want to learn and who want to produce knowledge. And I think that this kind of short-term revolving door, it really it messes up all of our priorities, if you see what I mean. And so
Absolutely.
I think that that's a big issue. I also think that just to think about some of the finances for a second, I read this article recently. I'll pop it in the chat as well. The cost allocation death spiral and the university. And what this was explaining was how the economic logic behind these kind of cutting of departments is just so silly. In a sense, what happens is universities have so many bureaucrats and so many debts and expenses, and to understand how departments operate, departments in a sense have to subsidize the central university and its finances, whether it's debt or administrators or whatnot. And so how you allocate those central university finances, you divvy it up between different departments. But the thing is, if you just cut a small department, archaeology, ancient history, something like that, that doesn't have a ton of revenue, doesn't have a ton of expenses either, what that does is it doesn't solve the problem, which are these centralized expenses. And so you just end up cutting smaller departments. It makes you look like you're accomplishing something, but you're not actually accomplishing that allocation spiral, which is the core problem, is your central administration and your real estate debts and stuff like that. And so it's just it's funny finances, if you see what I mean, rather than actual.
No,
And
I'm so pleased you have raised that point, because this is absolutely central. Because sometimes people just get that impression and said, okay, it's sad, it's a bit unfair, I'm happy they close your department or they close that course, but it needs to be understood that nowadays universities need to be run in a kind of financially wise way. But that's completely unwise. I mean, the example of our Department of Archaeology, which is a tiny example, is that the university has lost a lot of money by closing us. And this has been demonstrated by calculations carried out by our union, and to which the university was never able to respond. But it applies to so many other situations. But as you correctly said, universities actually waste a huge amount of money every day through absolutely ridiculous and useless bureaucracy. I have several times pointed that out, sending letters and raising these issues. They never ever reply. Even when you demonstrated the fact, look, you have put together a committee of 10 people, all very highly paid, to decide how to spend £1,000, how that can be, financially wise or sound.
you're spending more than £1,000 of paid time just for
Absolutely.
all those people. It's just absurd. And
Yeah, and may I give you just another example from the University of Sheffield? This is just an absolutely shocking situation University of Sheffield went through in the last few years, that basically stubbornly the executive decided to pursue a new IT system to manage students. Okay, they were repeatedly advised against it. Okay, they spent 30 million pounds, 30 millions, okay, 30 million pounds on that. And in addition, many people from various IT offices were devolved towards it to support the system. After a number of years, they decided eventually it wasn't going to work. everything, all the effort, all the work of these people, all that money, wasted.
Just gone.
Okay, you
Exactly.
might say maybe this was done in good faith, and I want to believe it was done in good faith. It was a mistake. But anybody who is a half decent manager who makes a £30 million mistake will resign.
And that's the issue with this short-term perspective of management, right? It's about doing something with your time there. So they embark on these challenges, then the person leaves, and then the next person says, no, it might have been in good faith, but it was done in good faith from that kind of short-term perspective of these revolving executives who keep
Yes.
going from one university to another based on the strength of their initiatives and their cuts. And it's just short-term perspective. We have the same thing just a month ago. It's reported Cardiff University is going to launch a new campus in Kazakhstan. So they're going to be
Yes.
launching a new. This was a month ago. They already knew clearly at that point that they were going to be proposing these kind of cuts. They kept that whole strategy. It was a very articulated, clear strategy with a ton of documentation to cut the cuts. And they kept it all close to their vest while they are trumpeting a new campus in Kazakhstan.
Yes.
And it's just like, are we a university in the UK and Wales for Welsh students and UK students, or what? What's the priorities of this institution? And it just seems kind of ridiculous the way they play these games. It's just so short-sighted and heartless in many ways.
Basically, take the money and run.
Yeah, yeah. Take the money and run. I
This
mean,
is how it works. Yes. Yeah.
and I don't want to get into it in this one, but it's also cut the stuff and run, damage stuff and then run. But for apparently the vice chancellor at Cardiff in her last role was instrumental in major downsizes. This is what I've heard. I've yet to do all the proper research, so this is allegedly for now. And so this is not these people do these cuts and then get rewarded. I think the individual that was behind cutting Sheffield Archaeology is now a vice chancellor at a different university in the UK.
Yeah.
So you're rewarded for doing these kind of heartless things,
Yeah.
and it's a real problem.
And in our case, going back to our campaign, I think if there is something we have achieved quite a few things. We didn't get what we wanted, which was to save the department. But one of the things we achieved is that we really humiliated the executive in front of the world. And I mean, it is totally clear that they will be remembered as the butchers of archaeology. They will be remembered as people who are incompetent, and they did a very bad job of that. And I think that's kind of important. And despite all this, as you said, people still manage to recycle themselves into other jobs despite having that kind of label. But I can add something else that you mentioned very rightly. What they get rewarded for cutting stuff, but I think the other thing is about stuff is that sometimes they even almost manage to transmit this perception that staff are some kind of burden for the university. So if you want to save the university financially, get rid of people. Like these people are just there to earn their salaries and doing nothing, doing nothing useful. The reality is that once you start cutting stuff, you deplete the cultural and educational level of the university. You deplete the range of disciplines and the range of opportunities that you can provide to students and to the wider community. So the university will inevitably be poorer after any staff cut. When they try to persuade people to go and just say, okay, but it's the short-termism you were talking about, because they think, okay, now we save some salaries, and it doesn't matter if the university gets a terrible reputation hit, because we are not going to care about what is going to happen to the university in 5 or 10 years' time.
Yeah, and that was actually the article that I shared on the death spiral, the allocation spiral of university finances. A big part of that was trying to make that exact argument. What they're doing is they are cutting what their essential product is, which is instruction and education. And so by cutting that, they are depleting the culture of the university, they're depleting the outcomes, they're depleting the attractiveness to the customers, if you will, the students. And so, doing that is not actually solving the issue. What you need to do is solve the underlying issue of the structural issues of why universities are facing financial problems. And that has to do with bureaucracy and public funding and real estate by and large, in most places of the world. And so it doesn't have to do with how much you're paying your ancient historians and your language teachers in the least. They're such a minor line item on the budget. It's just absurd. And so, it's like it's just it is absurd. The number of ancient historians that they're cutting here is doing minimal to fix their budget compared to actually figuring out the debt that they have from construction. So it's just it's kind of ridiculous.
But to be honest with you, I really don't think that is genuinely, consciously or unconsciously, I don't think that is really the target. I'll never be, I don't believe that people who work hard every day, you are on the front line in the university and the executive have different methods, to achieve the same aim. We have different aims. Our aim is to protect the university. Their aim is to protect themselves.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think also the fact that so many university administrators these days comes from a non-arts and sciences background is maybe the right way to put it. A lot of them come now from a financial background. I think that gives them a very different perspective on things than it used to be that universities were self-governed, and I think that at some point a lot of that was ceded away, which really worries me, if you see what I mean.
Though you will be surprised about how many academics, they became just different people when they go to those positions. The University of Sheffield executive is I think largely, not entirely, but largely made of former academics. Well, maybe they're still academics, but I don't think they're very much research active. And not all academics are the same. There are some who have a certain type of ambitions, and when they got in those positions, they just act like any other callous administrator who want to profit from the situation. I mean, they're not all like that, but many.
Okay, so I think we've gone through a number of the causes behind this. Was there anything specific at Sheffield? So I guess just also so other people can recognize when this is happening in the future, one of the things that struck me at Sheffield was what happened was a series of professors were retiring and not being replaced. So it was like kind of a warning sign that decision to not replace them was a harbinger of the potential decision to eventually shut down the department. Was there any other sort of warning signs that you could tell those of us elsewhere to think?
There were various. Basically, there was absolutely no investment in our department, just to give people a better idea of the scale of what you mentioned. I started working in Sheffield in 2004, and there were 30 members, permanent staff in the teaching staff, permanent teaching staff. By the time we were fighting our campaign, there were 11.
So it had already been cut by 2/3 at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, and there was an expectation from the university that 11 people would still do the job that 30 people used to do. That's the other thing. That's the other mistake we make sometimes as academics. We just work evenings, weekends, we just dedicate our lives, neglect our families, neglect our health, because we are compassionate people, because we are dedicated people, because we love our jobs, we love our students. but that is badly exploited by these people. So I think the question is that obviously we were struggling through overwork, and that always a sign of a crisis that was being implemented. So I think yes, obviously there had been a long-term decline in terms of numbers, and inevitably in the range of research and teaching that we were offered. But also, I think the money return was really bad, because the university would cut most of our earnings through our master courses and undergraduate courses. So what we would get in return to run the department, to run our courses, was minimal. I'm sure we weren't. I mean, everybody in the university was in the same position. So I think there was a long-term indication that it was going in a certain direction. And the question is, what started all this? Is that at some point the faculty was putting so much pressure on us, and we thought it was very unfair. And as we wrote a letter to the vice chancellor in good faith, we just thought we want to open a dialogue with this guy. We wrote a letter to vice chancellor, and the vice chancellor never replied to this letter.
Huh.
Okay. And he sent his pro-vice chancellor to have an online meeting with us. Bear in mind, this was happening during the COVID pandemic. Okay, to make things even worse. Okay, when we were all doing, the impossible to try to teach and make sure that the students would still have some kind of decent education. While all this happening, the pro-vice chancellor comes, has an online meeting with us, and basically all that she is able to say, and doesn't engage in any kind of conversation, is to just say, we are going to have a departmental review. At that point, I said to her, look, I know where you're going. You are thinking about closing the department. You are going to regret it. She didn't reply. Okay. My colleagues, some of them were quite more optimistic about that. I saw it coming. The review was just a farce, an absolute farce. It became immediately obvious that they had already decided to close the department. So I think the signs were all there, but the inability, the unwillingness to have any kind of conversation, which I had mentioned before, became particularly obvious.
Yeah, this has a lot of similarities to what I see happening here. Even in the press, our vice chancellor keeps saying, these are only proposals. And it's like, there's
Yes.
no real
Don't trust
system
them.
through which
Don't trust them.
to
No.
give any feedback on this. And like, it was just made in a top-down way. Yeah, I wouldn't trust them at all. And I can't go into too many details because it's ongoing conversations, but it's just like, from what I've seen, it sure does not seem to have any trust in and there's no information either. There's no real clear information, and the statistics are fairly misleading, as I think I went into on Blue Sky and Twitter and on here at some point. And just to jump into some of the statistics and think about this long term, I've been trying to, and I'm gonna delve in more on some of the statistics of what's happening here at Cardiff, because it's just so shocking at how it's just decimating the humanities, where like and I was shocked. So in a sense, the proposal is to cut 120 faculty, so academic staff, from 4 different humanities schools, and then to cut an entire additional school, the music school. And so that 120 comes from a total staff number of 240, which is not all academics, right? That includes like professional staff and otherwise. So we're talking about well over 50% of all the academic staff in humanities disciplines at Cardiff are being are proposed to be cut. And it's just like, and so I'm doing the math and I'm thinking that's like, it's something like 60% of all of them. That's a lot, right? And then I realized, what's so crazy is humanities faculty. I started doing the math. It seems to only make up about 10% of all faculty here. So this is a long-term decline, as you mentioned with archaeology, where, when I was a student in undergrad, it was like humanities were a significant portion of every university, you know, like humanities and social sciences were a significant proportion of what universities taught. And at this point, we're talking about a setting where it's only 10% of the university, and they're about to cut something like 60% of those faculty. So it's going to end up being about 5% of the university is humanities. And it's just, what are we even creating as these institutions here, if you see what I mean? And it's such a long-term slip that's going on. And
It's a
yeah,
cultural decline, which is exactly what they want, Flint.
yeah.
They don't want universities as places of learning. What they want is universities a kind of low-level training grounds for the disciplines that they regard as useful. Okay,
But don't we already
and
have trade schools? We have trade schools for that.
I know, yes,
It's
but
just,
they want your university to be on that same level,
yeah,
apart from if very few selected a university for the elite, and they think they are the elite. Okay, so it's okay to teach philosophy, it's okay to teach history, to teach archaeology, or to teach, I don't know, natural sciences. Let's not make it a mistake that the STEM subjects are not affected by that. They are affected too,
of
and
course.
and it's okay to teach them in some universities for where the power class, the people who have the power and the money will send the students, and the rest. And not by chance, you can, if you look at what are the universities, in which cities they are, pay attention, they are all in cities that are perceived as being largely working class.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I agree with that. And certainly I agree with you about the elite universities, I'm sure. Though I did see that Oxford has made a ton of cuts, they certainly are not proposing to eliminate these kind of courses
Ah,
there, because that
no,
that's part of their prestige, is that diversity of offerings.
no, they are
Y-
not immune. They are not
yeah,
immune, but certainly they are in a much stronger position. I mean,
of course.
people in positions of power will fear also universities like London, Oxford, Cambridge, Durham, and so on, because they are still places where, there is there is research, there is learning, and that's always a danger for the people in power. Former Labour Party leader, with whom I didn't share many political views, but I admired him in some respect, Tony Benn, and he used to say, you know, for the powers that be, if you want a population that could be easily controlled, you have to have a population which is uneducated and unhealthy. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what we are seeing. And look at what has happened in the States. Without all that preparation work, Trump would have never become the president. You needed that preparation work to have these kind of people to go to the top. And to Tony Benn's short list of two, unhealthy and uneducated, I would add a third one: you need people in debt. And
Yeah.
because people in debt are always vulnerable, and they will be very careful before they do anything. They will be afraid. Okay, and look at the student debt, for instance. Look at what we are creating. We are
Hmm.
creating generations of people who are basically condemned to be in
Yeah.
debt. Mortgage, students debt, add all that. And it's a political strategy.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's one of my issues with a lot of social media posts blaming voters. And it's like, what do you see all these posts about voters with regrets. Like they're like, oh, I voted for Brexit, but I thought it would be for this reason and not that reason. Or I voted for Trump, but I thought it would be this reason, but not that reason. And we have to remember that a lot of people were misinformed about what was going on. And so,
Yes.
because that misinformation works very well, it keeps us from doing anything, and it keeps us from understanding why we need to do stuff. And then, as you mentioned, debts also create a certain level of obligation as well, where you're obliged to do stuff. I certainly see that throughout these crises, when you know there are people that would like to speak up, but they certainly are not because they're scared, because they have obligations to their family, their colleagues, their
Yes.
friends, to not rock the boat too much, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
And so that's another issue as well. So okay, let's try to think of some lessons from this. So yeah.
No, I
Oh,
just wanted to say this is getting very gloomy.
yeah,
And
that's what I was thinking. Let's try to move to it. So
exactly. No, I
there'll be a
agree.
little bit
Yeah.
of gloom, but I mean, you know, one of the things that I think really impressed me about the campaign to save Sheffield Archaeology was we talked about how many people it hit, but there was so much creativity with it. There was so much passion and energy with it. And, you know, there, in that sense, it's certainly not a waste, because it did help bring together your community, and it helped inspire connections that I think are ongoing, including this conversation right here. And so I think that there's positives from that. And so I'm wondering how you reflect on that. Obviously, the outcome was not what you wanted. You wanted to keep the archaeology department and have it grow and flourish. On the other hand, now you are all in different departments. Some of you have left Sheffield. So obviously, there's still archaeology there, but it's split up and not coherent and not really much. So how do you take away from this? What lessons can you offer to other scholars that are going through similar transitions? What's effective? What's not? What's the positives? What's the, yeah.
I mean, first, I just want to mention something about my personal experience of that. I dedicated myself fully to this campaign.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was natural because I have always been politically active. Okay. So I saw what was coming, I knew how we would respond. And I was in very much involved with our union branch, which, to be honest with you, was brilliant. It really supported us very strongly. So I think one thing I would start saying: work with your union, be a union member, and support your union. It's the union is not perfect, far from it, far from it. I often disagree, especially at national level, sometimes even at local level. However, it's the only thing that we're, well, maybe not quite the only thing, but it's the main fully organized national body that we have or that we can use. So work with your union, and our union was instrumental to support our campaign. Personally, I have to say that it was very hard for me. It was very stressful. It took a lot of my time. I had to sacrifice a lot of my research because of that. But I don't regret any minute that I spent
Mm-hmm.
on that campaign. Uh, uh, Sometimes you just have to do the right thing, and you can't expect to have immediate results. If people were just making always calculations about, oh, I'll get involved only if the reward is around the corner, to be honest with you, if people always thought like that, we would still have slavery, women still wouldn't have a vote, and so on and so forth. Okay. If you look at the history of all the big civic campaign, you realize that the people never had an immediate return. So
Yeah.
sometimes you just have to fight the just fight, and you see that then people start talking about that there is an awareness of what was going on, and that is very, very important. The
I
other
think,
thing I would say,
wait. Keep your second idea. I just want to say I really appreciate that point. That point that
okay,
this is something that's long term and that it's not about immediate returns is so important. I see so many people depressed because it's like, we just lost this battle. What's the hope for the future? And it's like, we have to keep the long term perspective. And as archaeologists and historians, we are especially well positioned to try to offer people that long-term perspective. So
exactly,
thank
yeah.
you. I'm going to use that point in the future and do some research on that, because I think that that is just such an important point to make. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad that you agree because I think that is probably the most important point of all, in the sense that I think we just have to be on the right side. We have to be on the moral high ground and right side of the argument, and then whatever happens, because there is always a positive. So I think going back to the things we have learned, our campaign achieved quite a lot. If you think that at the beginning, it looked like most of us would lose our jobs. Okay. The future of the labs and the collections was not guaranteed. Okay. Um, and at the end of the day, all the academic jobs were saved. I very
Okay.
much regret that some of the professional service jobs were not saved. I was very vocal about that, but unfortunately, I was a bit of a lone voice there. And also our labs and reference collections still very much on the thread, but they are still there. So we did achieve something, but I think the main achievement has been to make people aware that things can be changed and that people can get together. And I think it has created a sense of greater solidarity among archaeologists around the world. And I think that's something we should be proud of. Um, Flint, when we started this, I knew perfectly well that we wouldn't save the department. It's not
Mhm.
that I it's not that I suspected so. I knew so. Okay. There was absolutely no way that they would go back from that. Okay. They had compromised themselves too much and they
Mhm.
wouldn't return on that decision. And yet we fought the campaign. As I said, you sometimes you just have to do the right thing. You have to do it for your students who were enthusiastically, creatively contributing to this campaign rather than sitting at home depressed. Okay, so we gave them a channel in which to use their energy in some kind of positive way. And so I think we have changed a little bit the overall scenario, and I actually think our executive has been very badly hit by that, and that they became much more careful afterwards. Also, their language at some point, after a few months, their language changed completely. It started with the fact that we were a useless bunch of archaeologists they wanted to get rid of. Well, they didn't use that words, but they used words that basically amounted to that. And then at some point, archaeology had become some kind of very precious field that they just wanted to protect in a different way, which obviously was total bullshit. But we forced them to change language, and I think that's quite important. If I can put just one other point, and also
Sure.
for the people in Cardiff and elsewhere, just keep going, keep fighting. You owe it to the next generation. We can't just lay down and accept that everything that is done to us, we just accept it and we don't respond, because otherwise never ever will change. You have to respond, and the responsibilities of everybody. If tomorrow we wanted to change all this toxic environment that has been created in the university, tomorrow we could change it by just getting all together. Okay, think about union strikes, campaigns. Even in our campaign, where you had one, if we had had 10, if on a picket line, rather than one person, you have 10, rather than 10 persons, you have 100. If on strike, rather than 100 people, you have 1,000. And the opportunity is there because the staff is there, our colleagues are there, our students are there. So the participation can actually revolutionize all these overnight. So the power is not with them. the power is still with us. So I
Yeah.
think we have to give that kind of, but it needs somebody to generate that kind of lead.
And I think that that's super key is it's so easy for us to all be divided, because we have so many things going on around us. We want to protect what we can. And so I think that the key is we need to be more unified in our response. We have to be more vocal in our response. And yeah, we need people that are willing to step up, because the campaign you helped lead, I mean, look, it was a collective campaign. There were a lot of people involved, but boy, Umberto, you were so active there and making sure to help everybody channel it in that direction. And in many ways, I think that it would have, despite all the great work of others, without your leadership, it would have definitely faltered. And so,
I don't want to restrict this to the action of an individual or anything. I mean, I was just part of a group, but I think it's what you said. It's the solidarity that is key. I mean, we have to help each other across, not just within one university, but across university, across sectors. We have to support and help each other, because that really can change things. Let's stop calling our colleagues from other universities competitors, please. It
yes,
just may, yeah, it just
silly.
made me just feel sick about just hearing that word. Okay, that's not the world. That's not what the university and the country deserve.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I also think, but at the same time, while a collective response is needed, it definitely requires an individuals who are willing to stick their neck out, and
Yes,
individuals who are willing to develop a kind of empathetic connection with people who are listening. Because, I do a lot of appeals to the public, by going on podcasts and doing things like that. And look, it's emotion that pulls at people and gets them to pay attention. It's a personal story. It's being able to put yourself out there on a personal level that
yes,
actually develops a connection and people to actually pay attention and recognize what's going on. And so, unions can only do that so much, because they're also have to be sanitized in how they
yes,
talk about stuff.
yeah,
And so it's certainly, and that's what I meant by you. You went out there and you gave it your personality and your emotion in a way that, it resonated with your colleagues and me and other archaeologists, but it also resonated with your community in Sheffield and with, and other sort of platforms. And we have to be willing to give a bit of ourselves, because if we just hide behind a union, we're never going to reach and appeal to the public in the same way. And I am all for unionizing. I'm part of the union.
no, no,
I'm going to be
absolutely.
cooperating and collaborating with the union here as they work to develop a response. So we'll have some of the union members on my channel, for example, and I'm going to have students on the channel and stuff like that. So it's going to be a wide variety. But I firmly believe that we need to put our personalities out there. And the more of us that do that, the more of us that can develop those kind of personal, empathetic, emotional ties, the more support we can get from avenues we would never expect. And
Yes.
so I think that that's valuable.
No, I agree, and you're right. We can't only work with the union. I mean, we had an independent Save Sheffield Archaeology campaign that worked with the union, but was not part of the union. It was a kind
Mm-hmm.
of independent thing. And why was it independent? Because we just wanted a grassroots movement that could go in any possible direction. But the other thing, sometimes people say, "Oh, I am afraid," and maybe sometimes people are right to be afraid. But I just want to say something. I've said some really strong things, and I carry on saying that. I still have a job.
Yeah, you do.
Okay, maybe not for long, not for much longer. Okay,
Fingers
uh,
crossed.
okay. I expected any minute that something would happen, but the reality is that uh, I almost became untouchable, because it would have become too obvious why they were getting rid of me. Now that they are probably going to get rid of hundreds of people, maybe they can put me in the
In
big
the
group.
midst, yeah.
and but otherwise before. So I've seen far too many people, just being very shy and afraid, and thinking that they were protecting their positions in this way. But these people are ruthless. They don't just give it down, and they will prepare to jump on you, especially if they see a sign of weakness, and
Yeah, I mean, we have to speak up. Like, I mean, these cuts have been ongoing. This is not the start to them. We've already seen this progressive just destruction of what universities used to stand for, and I don't know what else to do. Like, to me, we have to draw the line in the sand here. I mean,
yeah,
like it's not just with Cardiff, it's not just with the U.S. or the U.K. or whatever. We are at a point where higher education is totally transformed and where pseudoscience and misinformation is running rampant in the society around us. Like, it's not just professors and academics that need to stand up. We need to really get as many people as we can behind us in general for this kind of response, because we need to build a better world, because our
yeah.
world fucking sucks right now, like it is terrible. And what else are we going to do? Education is something that has improved our world so much over the last few centuries that it's like this is one of the key solutions to improving the world in the future, and we have to fight stronger about this. We
You
have
can
to.
see where the lack of education can lead to. We
Yeah,
have plenty of examples around us.
yeah.
It's one other case that we've seen in this country is Brexit.
Mhm.
Because um, I'm sure that many people vote for Brexit in totally good faith, uh, but many of them were very badly misinformed, and they were not given the opportunity to understand what was going on.
Yeah. No, I fully agree, and I think and I mean that needs to be part of our incentive. Is like we're all just scared of the world, and we're sitting there all doomer. Oh my God, the climate is changing. There's fascism on the rise. There's all this kind of stuff, and it's like, look, those of us that are intellectuals and scholars and academics and scientists, we have experience and expertise that can do something, even if it's not going to solve, I don't know, Brexit and the
No,
presidency and the trade wars and whatnot. It's going to do something for the long term, and I think that long term perspective you were talking about. I mean, I think that is a really brave right there. B, it's what we need to all keep in mind, especially those of us that are historians and archaeologists, because like we have to keep fighting for a better future. If you know
no,
what I mean.
absolutely. And because of our position, which is a privileged position, we have a great responsibility. Okay.
Yeah.
That privileged position gives responsibility, and that's something that people should bear it in mind. We are responsible to use our knowledge, our tools that not everybody has, not because they are not on the same intellectual level as we are. Of course they are, but maybe they haven't been provided with the tools that us as privileged people have. So we have a responsibility. And the other thing is that you were saying not just the professors, the academics, and so on. I think one thing that was absolutely great about the Save Sheffield Archaeology campaign, it was run just by student and staff together,
Hmm.
but there was no hierarchy whatsoever. We were just working together as group. We were following the same aims. And I think that's important. Let's get rid of any form of hierarchy in those fights, because we need to get that very strong feeling that we are equal, with whoever has any kind of position in the university, different levels of students from undergrads to PhDs, different staff, from the cleaners to the administrators to the teachers and the researchers. We are all in the same boat, and it's very important that we work as a group without making too many distinctions.
Yeah, and I mean, over here too, is the students are in many ways the brave ones, leading many of the charges, like the Save Ancient History at Cardiff. The petition that I just put in the chat was put together by students, and I just got an email today from the Ancient History and Archaeology student group, and they want to do things as well with me to try to support this cause. And in many ways, I find the students to be more active, more
Yes,
engaged, more fiery about these situations than some of my colleagues are. Not that my colleagues
same in
aren't,
Sheffield.
they're
Yeah,
just unsure of how to speak up, if you
yeah,
see
yeah,
what I
yeah.
mean. And so I think they're all against it. They just don't know the right way to speak up. And my answer is just speak up. But I understand all the concerns everybody has that sometimes makes them second guess how they're speaking up. But I think we need to try to overcome them. And students are fantastic at that. They're active, engaged. They see the problems with these cuts immediately, and that's the key point here too. These cuts, it's the students who are being harmed just as much as the staff
Oh,
who are being
absolutely.
cut, and we have to work towards that as well, because that's what we're there for as a
And they are
university,
really
for the students.
suffering for it.
Yeah, yeah, I've talked to
They are really
several, and
suffering a lot, you know. I mean, now that we move to biosciences, we are being forced to teach labs with hundreds of people, you know, difficulties in using our collections and all that. And it's still, I think it's still also the mentality that the management sees students just as providers of money, okay? And therefore, you know, as long as they are there, you know, and they pay their fees. It doesn't matter too much the way you treat them, but then they pay the price for that attitude, as we've seen in Sheffield, where the reduction. Because now the university also say they are in a financial crisis, although I'm not too convinced about that. But you know, there has been a reduction in international students. But of course, the reputational hit that the university has had through the closure of our department and many other activities has had consequences. Yeah.
yeah, major consequences. So I don't know. Let me see if anybody has any relevant questions for us. Does anybody in the chat have any good questions for Umberto or me on the situation or what we can do? I would just encourage everybody to look into your local community and try to find ways you can support education and science and intellectualism. Look into libraries that are under threat. Look into educational institutions that are under threat. I mean, geez, do you know that just today the National Museum in Wales just announced that they're closing their doors and they don't know when they're going to open them again because of the building being unsafe? I mean, Welsh heritage is under extreme threat right now. The National Museum is threatened closing down for good. They're cutting 60% of the humanities faculty here at Cardiff. It's just, what are they doing? Yeah, it's just terrible.
Museums are also very much under threat. It's part of the same phenomenon.
Yeah.
Absolutely the same. Yes, and schools too. Well, maybe we should open that particular
But
chapter.
this is all part and parcel of the same issues that we need to figure out. I mean, we just got in here. Is the Enlightenment being erased? I don't know if I'd go that far in saying that, but we are no longer valuing many of these kind of ideals that our societies have been built on over the last few hundred years, and so it's a real issue. You know.
But I think the thing is that is very important to bear in mind is that we have to respond,
Yeah.
and uh, and not just we have to respond, but we really have a duty to respond, and we have a duty not to follow this crazy flock of sheep which is going nowhere. You know, I think one of my favorite quotes is from the great philosopher Hannah Arendt, um, uh,
Hmm.
who say nobody has a right to obey. And this is what I keep saying to people in the university when they say, "Well, there's nothing we can do," you know. But see where, obviously she was referring to Nazi Germany there, and but see where things can go if you just take that attitude. Oh, there's nothing I can do. This is how the system works. I'll just better adapt to it. I mean, it's
Yeah,
frightening. We have to respond.
we have to respond and we have to actively disobey. I mean, like, I don't, yeah, there's no going along to get along. We've if we keep doing that, what we are doing is being actively complicit in these changes that are unjust and harmful to people we care about and love and our neighbors and our community and the world. And so, we have to friggin' speak up. And I get that that can be scary and difficult, but we absolutely have to.
Yeah,
Um, I don't see any other response, and that's certainly what I'll be doing. And I hope to have you back on to discuss some of your research at some point
thank you.
in the future, so that we can talk some animal bones. In fact, to be honest, what I expected to be doing today was being in the lab and live streaming zooarchaeology as I set up for teaching tomorrow. And instead, I'm here talking with you about the problems with higher education
Yeah,
and funding and cuts and whatnot. And it's just like, I had a huge plan for these couple months for this YouTube channel because I'm teaching zooarchaeology. I'll be in the lab all the time. I could actually go share this stuff in, like, bones and everything and how we do it. And now I'm stuck with this kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's terrible.
yeah.
Let's see. We have a question that is less polite than it should be, but since Meat Eater just gave me a little tip, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you judge your university management on the asshole-o-meter?
Uh, is 10 good or bad then on that scale? Uh,
Yeah, that's a good question. I would think, if we're thinking about asshole, that the 0 has to be the maximum asshole, right? So that would be
yeah,
my guess. So I don't know.
I'll better not say, but yeah, not say that the asshole seems. I won't say anything about people being assholes, but certainly in terms of competence and intellectual and moral integrity, for me they are on the 0 scale.
Yeah, and I think that's the best way to judge people anyway, is their moral integrity, their ethics, and how much they're willing to do for ordinary people out there in their community. And it's like, I don't know, we have to, I don't know. It's just an absolute nightmare. And yeah, the only thing I can think of we can do is speak up and
Yeah,
protest and do what's right as best we can. That's all we really can do. And if we get enough people doing the same kind of thing, we know from history that that can have results and responses. And so I would also make an important point to everybody as well, to practice good internet algorithm hijacking, let's say. Everybody like this video, go share it. Everybody go, when you see stuff that you agree with and you think is important, make sure you repost it on social media, you boost it, you leave a comment, you leave a like, because I find that people in our generation don't know how to do that, while Gen Z knows how to do this kind of stuff. And so, we have to actively work to make the internet a better place, even if it means our feeds might end up being a little more redundant because we're reposting and boosting each other more often. But we have to do that because we have to outweigh because the negative detractors, they know how to do that. They're hiring bot farms and troll farms and flooding the internet with crap. So our only response can be to flood the internet with good stuff,
yeah.
and so we have to do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
May I mention one final thing?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say that in all this, we must not forget the emotional price we all pay in these situations, in these campaigns, in our work, and all that. And one thing that really kept us going during our campaign was the feeling, not just of solidarity, not just of understanding, but real love and affection that we felt throughout, across the world. People really, wanted to embrace us. So I just want to send a similar message of love and solidarity to everybody in Cardiff for this very difficult moment, and just to say to them, forever. I have many friends in Cardiff, and forever you are always my colleagues and my friends, people I support, and you'll never ever be my competitors. And so I wish you best of luck, but bear in mind you're not alone.
Yeah, I agree, and from us too to you guys, I think we're all in this together in these dark times. So we have to just be solidarity through and through, and be supportive and try. And that's also why, look, I know that I'm going to have a lot of live streams and chats with people about this ongoing nastiness that is happening. But I will get back to more fun things and chats on actual archaeology, because you can't just become obsessed with all the bad news. It's not going to help us move forward. We need to, the only way to fight misinformation is to share real education in a fun, interesting, and entertaining way. So don't worry, we have some of that coming too, even though we'll have more chats on this. Okay. Well,
Thank
thank
you,
you so
Flynn.
much,
Great to
Umberto. It
see
was
you.
great. Yeah, it was great to chat with you. Thank you all for showing up. Give a like and a share. And I think Tuesday, I need to make sure it's still happening because of the news, but I'm going to have on Dr. Kushal Gupta to discuss the cuts to federal funding in the U.S., specifically from the perspective of the National Institute of Health. So that should be an interesting one. Also, another grim one. Yeah. So see you all.